Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to everyone. I'm delighted to welcome you all to this panel discussion on India AI dataset ecosystem. However, before we begin, I request our esteemed session members to please come in for front of the screen for a group photograph. Let us begin with introductions. It gives me a great honor to introduce our keynote speaker for this session, Dr. Saurav Garg, Secretary MOSPI. It is also my pleasure to introduce our esteemed panel members, Srimati Kavita Bhatia ma'am, GC and COO, India AI, Mr. Shravan Goli, Strategic Advisor, Coursera, Dr. Avik Sarkar from Indian School of Business, Mr. Gaurav Godwani, Co-founder, Civic Data Labs, Mr. Rahul Kulkarni, Chief Technologist, Samagra, and lastly, Mr. Manu Chopra, CEO, Karya, who shall be the moderator for this session. To start off this session, I would love for Srimati Kavita Bhatia ma'am to talk about the current data ecosystem and India AI dataset platform pillar under the India AI mission that was recently approved. Ma'am, if you may.
Thank you all, and it's my pleasure to be here. In fact, this is the first session after the lunch, but the audience over here does not say that, this is the first session, and also proves that AI is important, but data tops the list of the all things. So I'll just touch upon the India AI mission, which has been recently approved. It's a national level comprehensive program where various aspects have been looked at, and the challenges which currently the country is facing, we have tried to cater to all those things. I'll not touch upon the 7 pillars, but the most important pillar is the India AI dataset platform, which is the one session we are going to talk about. So this plays a very important role, as this pillar comprises of pillar comprises of 3 important aspects, which is one, national data governance policy, the second is the national data management office, and third is the India AI datasets platform. In fact, when we talk about the data, then the most important thing is the standardization of the data. Currently, whatever the policies and frameworks we have in India does not cater to this aspect. So this policy was conceptualized basically to enhance the quality of data, and we are basically only talking about the non-personal data, because we understand that when you talk about AI, you don't require personal data. The most important thing is that continuous flow of data is required, and non-personal data suffices to it. This policy will also enable the data access, so that all the stakeholders can get the data, be it government, be it industry, academia, or the researchers. They will be able to get the data in a safe, privacy and trust manner. We, as a policy, we are also putting up a framework, which we are calling it as a National Data Management Office. This is a very important institutional framework where we will be augmenting the data capacity in the government departments. We understand that there is a capacity, but it needs to be augmented with respect to the AI and the emerging technology aspect. And the most important thing is that we will be creating India AI dataset platform, which will enable and streamline access of the data. The National Data Management Office is being set up currently in the ministry, where they will be looking at all the aspects related to standardization, data sets classification, sharing of data, data access rules, regulations, retention of data, entire chain of data, right from the creation till the storage. The entire thing will be taken care by the data management office, and they will also be helping helping the data management units, which we will be placing in the ministries, so that they will assist the ministry in identification of high value data sets, how the data needs to be collected, stored, managed, in fact shared, what is the method of sharing the data, what kind of metadata and data standards need to be put in place, because data, unless and until have a particular metadata and data standards will not be able to understood by when we talk about sharing of data. And in fact, they will also be advising the ministries on the best practices to be followed, what is currently in practice, which is important and needs to be complied to in the ministry. And the most important thing, some of the ministries do have value attached to the data, how they can do it and how they can share it. The entire aspects will be taken care by the data management unit along with the NDMO. Now we talk about the most important aspects when we talk about our country, because currently the data is scattered, they are in files, they are in databases, but the databases don't talk about it. So what we propose to do, it's currently on the drawing board, and very soon we will be publishing an RFP on the creation of the dataset platform. This will be a one-stop solution for access of entire data. They will also bring the current AI models, they will be having tools, technologies to anonymize the data, curate the data, annotate the data, and also the entire AI software library, so that the providers, which is government departments as well as the private organizations, are also voluntarily they can share, because they are also taking the data, so they can also share and make this platform a very vibrant platform. And the consumer of this platform, which is very important from the India perspective, because if we want to increase our R&D ranking, then we need to promote startup industry researchers to have good data so that the solutions can be created. So this is where I'll stop. This is what IndiaAI mission will be doing, and very shortly you will be seeing the RFP for this. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for the presentation. Now, to share his invaluable insights on this session, I would like for Dr. Saurav Garg, Secretary MOSPI, to deliver the keynote address. Sir, please.
Good afternoon, and I must say it's a jam-packed house. So thank you all for coming here. Kavita gave a very good exposition of what the future holds out and how the datasets platform will evolve, keeping in view the AI mission. I will focus myself on what already exists and which will form the basis for what Kavita mentioned, and this is something which all of you can use as it exists, and I'll talk of what the opportunities are within the existing data ecosystem. I'll just talk about the existing legal framework and a bit on what are possible data sources that can be used, etc., and some of the portals which will get subsumed in the India datasets platform that Kavita mentioned. Just to give on the existing legal framework, we already have this Collection of Statistics Act of 2008, the IT Act of 2000, and the DPDP Act of 2023, which will soon get notified. And then we have sector-specific acts, which look at certain data which is collected in different departments, which was mentioned in the earlier presentation also. And there are certain aspects of data related to that particular department which are governed by that. But the Collection of Statistics Act is an overarching act which looks at across the government system on what is to be done with the data that is collected. Just to mention one or two salient features, that something like, I think many years back, philosophy was known as logic and political science was known as civics. I think now statistics is the old name for what you call as data processing, data anonymization, and data analytics, and a host of things. And I think that's what the Act mentions, that statistics is derived based on collecting, classifying, etc. And it can be of various forms. And administrative data, which is resting in a lot of ministries, is one important part. And of course, the data analysis or statistical analysis is crucial for this. And this is what is the mandate of the Collection of Statistics Act. There are clear provisions on data disclosure, that the government may disclose individual returns, etc., for statistical purposes of our research. But For other purposes, there has to be a confidentiality in terms of the anonymization that we talk of, so that the information of the details of the person who has given that information is not revealed at any time. And I think that's where the difference is between the raw data and the processed or anonymized data. And I think all of us that we are talking about out here is on the statistics part, or what we might call as processed data, and or data that we can work off. And raw data is something that we have to be careful about when we are using it in any manner. The existing system, there are different government entities which collect data. State governments collect data. A host of other organizations, quasi-government or private, collect data, and different ministries, and then each of them disseminates in different manner. I'll just touch upon some of these as we move ahead. The Act classifies data into three major parts, and I think that's what is the class. One is core statistics, which is data of national importance, which includes data regarding national accounts, the consumer price index, which is what is used by the periodic labor survey report, which gives the employment, unemployment data, and a host of data which is used by the Reserve Bank of India, used by the rating agencies to talk about the Indian economy, and that's what really constitutes the core statistics. Then you have a set of administrative data like Manrega data is there, or the National Food Security Act data is there in terms of the number of people who have ration cards, etc. And then you have alternate statistics, which would include a lot of data which the private sector has, or new forms of data, which is scanner data, nightlight data, etc., which can be. Obviously, the focus of the Official Statistics Act is the core statistics, but these are all dynamic. Today, something might be alternative data, it might move to core statistics, and tomorrow it could move in and out. So these are things which we keep on reviewing and see, and which part of it falls under. Just let me give you a brief snapshot of some of the official or the core statistics that we have. And this is the national account statistics, on which basis, which is what determines that this year India's GDP is so and so, or this year the total private capital expenditure in the country is that. And this is a core official statistics that the Ministry of Statistics brings out. And this is used by a host of everywhere to track economic growth. This is the data. We have annual estimates which are there on the website since 51, 52. And I must say, and you'll see in the subsequent slides, perhaps India is one of the few countries which is so open about data. I don't want to name countries, but large developed countries are not so open about data, and I think all of us sitting in this room must keep that in mind. We have quarterly estimates since 1999, and of course, it covers the entire host of data that there are. And this is just one chart looking at the GDP growth rates and the annual GDP estimates, and this goes back to since more than 75 years this data is available, and this is available at the disaggregate levels also. Then you have the consumer price index, which really determines a host of activities, including the annual raises that all of us get on what is the inflation rates. And this has been collected since 1961. It was not so comprehensive initially, and from 2010 it's been reworked, and it's much more. And it's available at different disaggregated and granular level. If you want to know what's been the inflation rate of food since 1961, you can pull it out of housing, clothing, and it's widely used across for policy or policy making, economic planning, etc. And this is, for example, just on the left side is a chart which gives the inflation rate state-wise, where it's more than 6% and less than 2%, 2 to 6% being the band, which is used by the Monetary Policy Committee of RBI to decide what the interest rates would be. On the right side, you have the disaggregated level in terms of what's for food and beverages and what's different activities on housing, and in each of them different classes. And this all data is available on our website. Then you have the index of industrial production, which gives what's been the monthly growth rates at a disaggregated level in different sectors. In manufacturing, it breaks it down into 20 sectors, that what's been the growth rate, and this is the data which is necessary for any kind of forecasting to do on what is to be done, and what's the gross value added in each sector and at various levels. And again, this goes back since 1950. This is just the month-wise for the past 12 months. We have given the growth rates in different sectors of mining, manufacturing, electricity at an aggregated level, and overall general growth rate for industry. Then we have this survey of industries, which is a sample survey done across the country of somewhere around 80,000 odd establishments. And this is done in a scientific manner so that you can make estimates at the all India country level which are credible and acceptable internationally. In fact, many of you might be aware that the statistics that we started in the 1950s has been really the basis for all kinds of global statistics. Mahalanobis is the pioneer in that. So we collect this since 1960, and it has data on employment, wages, the kind of value addition, what's the total depreciation, and again you can go down to a granular level. And to a unit level, obviously it's anonymized, but that will give you, and these are just net value addition and number of factories that exist in the country. These are factories in the formal sector. The periodic labor force survey is something which is extremely important to determine what's the employment and the unemployment status in the country. This has been launched relatively recently in 2017. We compile it on a quarterly basis, and we are soon moving to a monthly basis also, and both for the rural and urban areas separately. So occupation-wise, you can get data on what are the occupations, what's been the growth rate in which sector, etc., which will give an idea of what are the kind of skills required. And this is again, the latest is of 22-23, it's already there. And this is just a snapshot of, for the past 6 years in rural, urban, male, female, what's been the, what's the worker participation rate overall, and you can break it down into geographical areas, etc. The household consumption expenditure survey, which is in fact really the pioneer globally, that because income estimates very few countries do, because all of us realize if you ask anyone an income, they will be very, very hesitant to talk about it. They will either understate it or overstate it depending on where the aspiration level is or where the desire is. So globally, consumption expenditure is a much better estimate to make for income. And this is something that we've been doing for a number of years. It's on a monthly basis. And the data is again at different kinds of, you can cut it, chop it at different kinds of levels. And this is, for example, for the past 5 rounds we have given the data levels, and the latest was of course of 22-23 on how it's increased. This is on nominal basis, not real basis. The time use survey, this is a very interesting, for the first time in 2019 we did it. How do people spend their time on a daily basis? How many hours do they sleep? How many time they spend on eating, drinking, etc., etc.? What is the time they spend on volunteer work, on unpaid? And the current one of 2024 is going on. We should be releasing it shortly. But this gives the time, for example, women spend doing unpaid domestic work across in different states. And again, it's statistically, the methods used are something which can give us, we can make state level, national level estimates. How many times men sleep and women sleep. There's a gender bias out here too. And on different, how much time you spend socializing on a day, etc. And this data is all there in the public domain. Social statistics, which is an important area of women and men in India since 1995, on gender statistics, on environment statistics, and the SDGs, which we do since 2019. On each of the 17 SDGs, we have nearly 300 indicators which look at what's been the progress on a yearly basis. Just what's been the number of self-help groups, and you can again look at what's the gross enrollment ratio, and this I'm just giving it at an aggregate level. As I mentioned, this is available at different levels. This is an economic census which is done since 1977, and it gives the details on, and because it's a census, it's not a survey, and a census by its very definition means we physically visit every establishment in the country. So it's not a survey, it's not an estimate, it's an actual number. And for example, in the 6th economic census, the last census for which there are 11 million records which are there on our website, and we are hoping to do the next one soon. This is the unincorporated sector enterprises. This has been said that we underestimate our informal sector, and that's what's led to this annual survey to collect data and make an estimate of what's the level of gross value added from the informal sector. And the 22-23 data is out. We hope to soon release the 23-24 data also. So this is just around 6.5 crore enterprises exist, and you can get details where they are, etc. Numbers, obviously not individual, we anonymize it. This is an ongoing one which is focusing on service sector, because that's the sector that's so important, and what are the number of workers working there, etc., and the pilots going on. So just to summarize, these are just the kind of data that's available across our website. And there are, of course, the National Family Health Survey, which the Health Ministry does, which is much more focused for people who are wanting to work in that area. And what is even required is that we have the unit level data also we put out, which can give you some insights, but obviously it's anonymized, but all this data is available on the website. Just of last few slides, which in fact form the basis of the India Datasets platform, which was mentioned earlier. So this is something that we relaunched in a much more user-friendly manner just on 29th of June on the 18th Statistics Day, which hosts nearly 1.7 million records on all the kinds of information that I mentioned, and which is available through APIs to be put in. These are some of the other data portals which already exist. Our own website, which is Beyond eSankhiki, which has a number of visualization. The Open Government Data Platform of MITI, which is at data.gov.in, has more than 6 lakh resources. The National Data Analytics Platform of Niti Aayog has nearly 300,700 data sets. The Reserve Bank of India has a lot of data on each, and the websites of the different ministries have. And that's what the work is now, trying to see how we can pull in that data together so that it's available at, if not one, at 2 or 3 places, so that there is no single point of failure, and at the same time, it's available at a limited number of places. The challenges and what we need to do, I think these are something which are dynamic, which will keep on, we need to keep running to stay at the same place in terms of improving quality, reducing bias. For example, the surveys, the commonly, what should I say, the criticism of the surveys that the Ministry of Statistics does is that the rich don't allow themselves to be surveyed. And it's true. To any posh locality, if it's there in a stratified sample that we have to visit the house number 801 on this, that person may or may not allow the surveyor to attend or meet. And therefore, there is that common that there's a downward bias in our estimates because the rich and the super rich are not covered in that. We have measures to take care of that, but obviously there's always scope for improvement. Data sharing and confidentiality, anonymization, up till now it was so much more easier, but with AI coming in, anonymization can be broken, and I think that's what we will continue to work on. Data storage and access, I think you know these things better, so I won't dwell on that, but the fact remains that this is something that all of us would have to work on. There's just one other point. This is P.C. Mahalanobis, the pioneer of Indian statistics, and National Statistics Day is celebrated on his birth anniversary, that's 29 June every year. One point which since all of you are AI experts, just want to flag that issue which I was mentioning to some. that we are generating a lot of data. We are generating a lot of data sets. We are looking at how to generate in different languages, how to improve that. But we need to keep in mind for whom are we generating that data set. Which large learning models are we training on those data sets? Who will own that large lane? Who will own the learnings of that data sets? We just need to reflect upon it, think about it, and ensure that whatever we do, we don't compromise our national interest. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for such an immensely informative keynote. And now, to guide us through an exciting and illuminating session, I'm pleased to hand over the proceedings to our moderator, Mr. Manu Chopra. Mr. Chopra, if you may.
I think that might be the hardest thing to follow. That was incredible. I think it's just awe-inspiring to see the amount of good work that's happening. So excited to take this forward with the panel. My name is Manu. Have the honor of being the moderator for the session today. I also help run something called Karya. At Karya, we bring AI-enabled earning and learning opportunities to low-income communities globally. We train workers in rural India to build complex AI training data sets. This year, we'll employ 100,000 people across all states in the country to build these high-quality data sets. I think we believe strongly that rural Indians are excellent builders of AI and excellent beneficiaries of AI, right? So I think very excited to see India being on the brink of a data revolution and hoping that this data revolution brings in sustainable, inclusive growth, which I think is what everyone here cares about. And I have a very exciting panel with me today to help us guide through these questions we have around data governance, about tackling bias. So I think with that, it would be fantastic to start with Kavita ma'am. Kavita ma'am, you spoke to us about the incredible IndiaAI mission. The IndiaAI mission dataset platform, of course, aims to streamline access to high-quality, non-personal data sets for AI innovation. You rightfully pointed out, I think the reason the room is packed is because I think everyone wants your answer on, could you please give us a holistic view of how the IndiaAI mission looks at the datasets problem, and how will the datasets platform specifically help us close the gaps that exist in the ecosystem today?
I mean, this is a very important question. As I said, and also was told by sir, that huge data is being collected and they are segregated. It's not at a one-stop platform. So what we propose to do through this platform is that we will bring the data sets, not the data sets onto this platform. This will be a hub of data sets where we will be also provisioning the compute, because as sir said that we need to make that thing in our mind that this data should be used for the national interest, for whom are we using it, who will be earning it. So what we propose to do is that the platform will be accessed by the researchers, academia of our country to start with. Currently, we propose to do that, and they will be able to use this data to train the indigenous models, because it is also one of the pillar I didn't touch upon, but it is also one of the pillar of the IndiaAI mission, where we propose to create the indigenous LLMs or LMMs, where it will be downstream to the domain-specific models, and these models will be using the data available. So we will be providing it as a platform where annotation service will be given, data labeling, data curation services will be given. In fact, Bhashini models will be brought also onto this platform so that we can give a language flavor to it, so that once the application is developed in English, it should be translated to the multiple languages. And in order to train the models, we will be also integrating with this platform the compute functionality, which is also one of the pillar where it has been said that 10,000 GPUs will be created. So that will be created. And plus it will be a collaborative platform so that the researchers can collaborate amongst themselves, talk about the problems, understand the solutions, and also can have a collaboration outside also if one has done that kind of a thing. So it will be an entire hub bringing all the aspects related for developing an application with respect to data, compute, and everything. So that's what we are proposing to do.
Incredible. I think that's just very exciting to see. I think moving to you, Shravan sir, it seems like the government has its act together. It is doing a lot of amazing things. I want to talk about the way Coursera currently thinks about data sharing while maintaining the privacy of the data that you have with your academic partners to improve the learning experience for customers that come to Coursera. And I want to maybe ask you to take your example and use it as inspiration for startups in the room so they can think about how can they use the data that they have responsibly to make that happen.
Yeah, fantastic question. First of all, thanks. It's an honor to be on this panel. Thanks for the invitation for the May team, but also your esteemed panelists here. That was a great outset both of you laid out, especially as I thought about the data sets and really it's kind of generalizing the access in terms of data sets and compute is going to really allow a lot of research and academia. And that's what we do. Coursera, we're a platform that connects a global learning ecosystem where we have over 140 million learners around the world who are coming to Coursera because they're looking to upskill and reskill into in-demand jobs and careers. And I think, Gen AI is going to have major disruption. It's a major enabler as well as major disruptor. And so that's where we've been spending a lot of time in thinking about how Gen AI is going to transform how we learn, how we teach, and how we work. And those are sort of the three major ways we think about it. And when I think about how we learn, clearly there's a lot of content that gets consumed on Coursera, including just in India, we have over 25 million learners, over 60 million enrollments of courses over the course of the last few years in business, technology, data science, machine learning, etc. And so we have a lot of this data that's getting generated. But more importantly, I think, earlier you were pointing it out, we also understand how it is difficult for a learner in a world where, they're alone, they're online, they're learning on demand. There is no accountability, there is no support for this individual to kind of continue their learning journey. So as we think about it, at the end of the day, from an educator perspective, it is about generating outcomes. And so for the learners, what is really important is the ability to kind of complete and gain those skills and the credentials that signal the value. So Gen AI, I think December 2022, when ChatGPT was announced, it just opened the landscape for anyone to be able to start building an AI. I think that is the big shift that has happened in the last 5-6 years with the data revolution, but commoditization of access to AI. But it also meant that companies have started a new sort of race, if you were to say, And so those are the companies that have existing data sets are the ones that are ahead of the curve at this point. But with all of the initiatives that you're laying out, I think it's going to bring a number of other companies to the surface. So where I was going with this is, from a learner perspective, we launched what we call as Coursera Coach. And Coach is sort of in the learning space, a holy grail is to have an individual tutor. If everybody can afford a tutor, no matter who you are, where you are in the world, what you can afford to pay, if you can have a tutor in the world, that will be the ultimate, game, right? If we all can have fitness coaches, imagine how many more gyms will be filled up. But we can't have those coaches enough, right? So that's what we're doing with Coursera Coach. It layers out a personalized interactive learning experience. Now, what Gen AI enabled us to do through the LLM capability is to take the course context and create an experience where the course context could be used to create summaries, to create conversationals in terms of additional learning that they can do. In fact, what we're seeing is some of these individuals are doing pre-quizzes. They're generating a quiz themselves and they're practicing the quiz before they go take the assessment. So that's one part of it. The other part of it is really you talked about academia and the educator side of the equation. How do we help educators to become more effective teachers or effective, in delivering their mission, right? So part of the problem is content creation. And thinking about in the age of Gen AI, if you actually see ChatGPT traffic, it goes down in summer and then picks up in September. When all of the schools and colleges are back in action, it picks up. And so clearly there is a lot of appetite from students' perspective to cheat, or so to speak, to learn. So we see that same trend. So what has to happen is the pedagogy has to evolve continuously from how these educators teach. And they have to keep up pace with it. So one is content creation, the other is the assessment creation and how you deliver those assessments and how you grade them. all of this can be scalably done through Gen AI. And so this is where another investment that we've been making on the behalf of these educators and sharing a lot of those insights. And so one of the things that these educators are going to doing testing is University of Michigan is testing this Viva Voce way of testing. The traditional way of assessment would be, okay, you go through some learning and then you get a quiz or you get an assessment, you just repeat what you memorized. But what this is doing is through conversational AI interface, you can actually do just like we all went through this. When you have a thesis, you stand in front of the faculty and you do this and they're quizzing you directly. It's all based on the knowledge that you already gained. And so that's one way we're doing. The other thing I think was interesting, we're testing a lot is taking this coach capability and we're actually generalizing it to create what we call as a coach item, which means that as a faculty member, you're not there online with the student when the student is actually learning on their own time frame. Now, what if we can actually create the faculty GPT embedded into the course? In essence, that individual, that professor or the teacher is actually training that coach to be themselves with their context. And so we've been experimenting there and we're starting to see there's a lot of opportunity there. And so that means a lot of these individuals in the academia, they don't actually have to go learn GPT or prompt engineering and all of that, but they can actually use coach item and just really create a few instructions and their course context becomes valuable for the coach item to be themselves. So these are some of the ways that we're facilitating. And the third piece I will say is the last one is how do we do this responsibly? Mm-hmm. And this is where, as you think about the startups and even big companies, establishing fairness, establishing responsible AI principles upfront became really important for us. And we all jumped into it. We started teams of people, started working on it. And then you kind of step back and actually say, hey, where is the data governance? Where is the privacy protection? Where are we in terms of ensuring the model is not hallucinating or creating biases in terms of our experience? And so we also do model-to-model comparison, actually. So it's almost like benchmarking one model against another model to create at least reduce the bias out of these. And then to your point, languages is really important, multilingual experience. And so we've used AI to translate almost 4,000 courses into 21 different languages, including Hindi. This was not possible 18 months ago. And the cost of doing it was almost $10,000 per course for translation to $10 now. So it's crazy in terms of how technology is moving fast.
Fantastic. That's amazing. I really appreciate that. I like that way of thinking around AI transforming the way we'll work, we will teach, and we will learn. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I like the fact that you mentioned that data remains to be a challenge, and the way we share it has to be very responsible. Coming to Dr. Sarkar now. Dr. Sarkar, both Kavita ma'am, Dr. Garg have spoken about the fact that lack of Indic language data sets remains a challenge in the ecosystem. Could you talk to us a little bit about, and we've heard this in several other panels, so I know this is a pain point. Could you talk to a little bit about how do we go about creating these large data sets that we need so that researchers, startups, governments can actually build the world-class AI applications that the citizens are asking for?
Yes, thanks. So I think excellent overview from Kavita ma'am and Dr. Garg on the statistics data set and what India data sets platform is doing. I think this is a tremendous effort and this will accelerate the development of AI to a large extent for India, and this is very much needed for the country. I think when we look at Indian data set particularly, you have to understand it's a cycle and a development that goes through. Today we are seeing the LLMs being so successful in 2022, but there is a lot of work that has happened before that. You have Wikipedia and annotation of Wikipedia in Project Gutenberg. If people in that ecosystem will know that. That happened during the 2008-2010 timeframe. So 10 years before that, every word in all Wikipedia which is open is tagged with what is the part of speech, what are the objectives to that. Go back another 10-20 years, you have something called WordNet. And people who have worked in the NLP domain would know that WordNet was developed by the Stanford or Princeton, I think one of the Stanford or Princeton University. Yes. So they are told like that apple and orange is the fruit. We all know that, but putting to the like a directory and putting the structure requires a lot of effort and time. So we are talking about 40 years of development that has happened in English. And before that, even if I go to the 80s, DARPA used to give fund, and this is a very US focused only, to Cornell for development of the TREC dataset and all the other US universities for developing large datasets in English. And that's the reason why we see English is like far ahead, because the whole world's academia and research community has worked on English. When I was doing my master's and PhD, I also worked on English. So these were there as data sets. If today Indian languages are available in the ecosystem, people will do that. So I think we have to break up the R and the D of R&D separately. One is research, which many of you are talking about. The research, we need foundational framework data sets which will take research forward. But if a company wants to monetize it, they really cannot do it on open source. They have to spend some amount of effort collecting their own data, engaging with companies like you to annotate that data, because that will give them the competitive advantage. So even though we talk about R&D together as one acronym, we have to segregate that. And this say, what are the nuances of Manipuri as compared to Tamil? I think this is something the research will find out. But if someone has to develop the application on top of that, I think that has to be done by a company. These two ecosystems in India, we know, don't talk too much together, but I think this has been an issue. Is a public-private partnership, and the government has to do this, has to take off to the ecosystem to be there. I think very good effort from the government at this point, but I think how much can the government do? And Kavita ma'am, I think you are trying to do a lot of things. I think how much can the government do? And if you take again the US example, government can do small things like this platform, but then also use people in the ecosystem, like say AI for Bharat. One from IIT Madras. I know Professor Ravindran was there yesterday, he is not here today. That's an excellent effort that is there. A small amount of funding from industry, a lot of support, and they are one of the major pillars which is supporting Bhashini along with CDAC and many other players also. What IIT Bombay is doing, again, because a researcher will have a vested interest to create those data sets, publish paper and forward their research. Their revenue is not money. Our researchers' revenue is not dollar. Their revenue is the high quality research publications. If they get first scale access to data, they can talk in their value ecosystem, and that is very important. If we can have like 10 or 20 of such institutes in India, and each can take advantage of different language, like Gujarati can be done in some university in Ahmedabad, it can be some Odisha been done somewhere in Odisha, so it can be a very different institutes doing that. And if you are talking about Indian data set, there are efforts from say AI for Bharat, and AI for Bharat is the first time we are seeing Indian data sets in millions, but we have to go to billions. And it's not that data doesn't lie. If I tell you about two sources, we have had regional newspapers for the last 50 to 100 years, at least in the major 20 languages, regional newspaper. These are all newspapers which are live in archives. So they are all open, no confidential data. They are all lying open. There is a need for government funding. Now, if government tries to do that, they are administrators. They cannot do that. They cannot do all of this, because this is a very dirty job of going to the archives, scanning them, collecting from the OCR to the text, correcting them, and where companies like you will play a role, annotating them, and then making it available in the ecosystem for research. So this data lies, and we are not using it. All India Radio, Ministry of Communication has so much of the data there. And this can be considered some sort of a parallel data set, because if say the major news in the same day will be almost the same. There might be some differences based on local things. So it can be sort of parallel data set again, but these are data sets that has to be unearthed. And for doing that, only government can move that. If I go and tell to the newspapers across the India that give me your data, they will not do it. But if the government tells the Ministry of Communication to release the All India radio data, the Indian newspaper data, they will do it. But they possibly cannot do the running. They have to do the partnership and then select organizations along with philanthropy funds to correct these data sets. And these will be very, very valuable data sets that can enhance the ecosystem, because we have to really think of innovative ways to accelerate our journey on what is happening there. So these are two areas. I just want to touch upon one thing that Dr. Garg talked about, alternate data source, because alternate data source is of great interest to me. And you also talked about the household expenditure survey, which I understand any survey is so much expensive. Now think about banks. Today, money has been transferred from one account to other account from UPI. It's like a one-time work to identify what is the type of business of the UPI. So banks can give on a aggregate level. So this is a person who receives 50,000 rupees per month. So you are not giving it at an individual level. For someone who is giving 50,000 rupees a month earning, what are the areas or businesses he is spending it, and not give it for individual. It can be for a whole district. For a whole district of, say, a particular district in UP, people who are earning in the 25,000 to 50,000 range, 50% of the income goes into food items, 20% goes into entertainment. So this level of aggregate data at all India level can actually complement a lot of the statistics that you are generating. Now, on day one, they will not be exactly accurate, but it will start the discussion that how much the big data sources are different from that. And there are many such ways that we can look into these alternate data sources, because once these methodologies are established, they will run without spending any money. So it's a very inexpensive modules. So I'll stop here for now. Yes.
Over here, I just wanted to add that AI for Bharat has been a very successful initiative which has been started by the ministry themselves. In fact, we also have one initiative under Bhashini's Bhasha Dan, where we are asking the citizens to give the language-based content. Similarly, we're also working very closely with the states so that we can collect the data in the local languages. So we are trying different ways and methods which are just answering to your questions that yes, government understands the value of the language-based data, and that's the reason we have started various initiatives. In fact, we are also having multiple MOUs with the private organizations who have a good quality of data, and we are seeing how we can have the Indian part of that data onto our system so that Bhashini can be strengthened, and also that data can be made available at the open source level. We'll work on that so that the researcher community of India can get benefit when the government has funded that thing. So various initiatives have been taken place, and AI for Bharat has been a successful story which everyone knows about it.
No, absolutely incredible. I think, thank you so much for that, Dr. Sarkar, and thank you for the response, Kavita ma'am. I think it is important to remember that, the internet itself was a government project, right? Like we all know. And I think in India, we have seen excellent examples of government excellence, right? Whether it's UPI or Aadhaar, or we see what MeitY and MOSPI are doing now. And I think, Dr. Sarkar, your answer almost creates a blueprint for a data revolution, right? Which is us using these other forms of data sets that exist. We recognize that the demand is very high, and we almost need to try everything possible to get there. I think I would like now to come to Gaurav. I'm going to move this way. Gaurav, you've been working on this for a long time. Could you talk to us first about some of the challenges that you have seen while trying to get the civic sector to go towards data-driven decision-making, and what are ways you have thought about solving those?
Thanks a lot, Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, for having me here, and thanks Kavita ji and Dr. Garg for your opening remarks. So thanks a lot, Manu, for that question. We at Civic Data Lab are trying to strengthen data for public good ecosystem, trying to unlock data sets which already exist in our ecosystem but are not accessible, searchable, discoverable, standardized, and AI ready or machine readable ready. So that's the kind of problem we are working on. So since we are a post-lunch session, let's do a quick show of hands so that all of us are here and all of us are able to participate in the discussion. So my quick question to the audience is, how many of you have used a data set of your own country, which you feel that it's AI ready, which you can plug in a AI model of your choice? Just raise of hand if you feel you have used a data set which is of your own country, which you feel is AI ready. I'm sure there will be more. Think, how about your state? Let's go a bit more deeper in the geography. Have you used a data set of your own state which you feel is AI ready? There was one more hand back there, a couple of them. Let's go to the city level now. Let's go to your district or city or municipality. Have you used a data set which is AI ready, which is of your own city? So yeah, with me there is another gentleman there who feels that there are data sets out there. We just need to make them more discoverable, more accessible, more standardized. So that's the kind of problem which we are working upon. I personally feel India ecosystem is replete with these data sets. Currently, they are not discoverable. Even if you find them, you would find that they are not standardized, that you can just plug in your model and take a course at Coursera and try it out with whatever the LLM model you are playing around. And even if you found them, and if somehow you manage to standardize that, the second roadblock you hit is the timely update of these data sets. How can you ensure that it's timely updated so that you can derive insights on a near real-time basis, plug it to potentially create a AI for public good model, a model which could be then maybe used by governments, civil society partners, think tanks, researchers, academia, to actually improve the socio-economic development of our country. So that's where the opportunity lies in front of us. Also, if a young researcher discovers these data sets, we don't have that network of chief data officers to guide them how to use this data set, how to derive maximum value out of it. So that's where we need to create a support system, which is definitely government is playing their role, but also civil society partners, think tanks, researchers, again, whoever have the expertise to look in some of these data sets, for example, data sets of climate, data sets related to urban development. Those are the people who would have the subject matter expertise, who would guide you on how to use this data set to actually solve some of the complex problems in the society. So enabling that collaboration is something which we have to work towards. Now, Manu might ask me, how do you do this? Like, these are valid problems, but show me some examples.
How do you do this?
So number one is prioritize high-value open data sets. We have already seen 75 countries have published their open data plans in open, saying that these are the sectors, these are the areas we would be prioritizing as governments to release open data of high quality for citizens at large to consume. So that's number one. We should join those list of countries. EU also has released an open data directive just last year, where they have listed down that these are the high-value data sets we would be prioritizing as a union. So it's time that India also starts declaring this kind of an open data action plan for everyone in the country to realize that these are the data sets we would start seeing in a standardized manner. Second is foster multi-stakeholder partnerships, because we spoke about in other remarks as well, my fellow panelists have discussed that it's not one person's job to make this data ecosystem rich for AI. We need to bring everyone on board. We have seen these examples in the northeastern region of the country in Assam, which is flood prone, and as we are entering the monsoon season, some areas of the Assam are already flooding at the moment. So few years back, when we were working with several stakeholders there, we realized that Assam has a lot of unique data sets related to socioeconomic development, geospatial data from Bhuvan, IMDb, losses and damages data, day-wise losses and damages data collected with the help of UNICEF team in Assam. Other data sets like government tenders which are being done related to floods, infrastructure-related data is like where is the nearest shelter, where is the nearest public hospital available which could be accessed during the flooding period. Now all of these data sets can we harness, develop an AI model to tell me what is the preparedness score of the district and the revenue circle in the region, and which revenue circle, so revenue circle is the smallest administrative unit when it comes to the administration of services. So which revenue circles require more attention? Which districts require more attention? What I can do before the flood season so that the preparedness of that particular district and revenue circle could be increased and they would be better placed to cater the flood this season. This is the kind of AI model which is being developed there. Civic Data Lab is one organization, but we have worked with other organizations like UNICEF, Assam State Disaster Management Authority, on-ground organizations to collaboratively develop this sort of a data model. Now, potential of this data model is that it can definitely solve use cases and issues of that state, but it could be also replicated to other geographies if we find right partners and right collaborators to open up data and have this kind of a data ecosystem in that geography as well. So identifying these use cases which could solve local issues and then has a potential to be replicated in other regions, that's one way. And lastly, I think the need to create a unified data exchange, Kavita ji already talked about it. I think it has a huge potential because we have a lot of data at MOSPI, at data.gov.in, some other community-led data portals. We have seen PhonePe also opening up data related to digital payments. We have seen data sets coming from Ola Mobility Institute regarding mobility and other categories. How can we bring all of these data sets at one place? I think that's the potential with the unified data exchange. So yeah, I would just stop here. And for that data exchange, I think already conversation is beginning and we would require all of your inputs to see how we can do it in a trusted manner, in a way which is secure, also enables everyone to contribute data at one place.
Thank you. I appreciate that a lot, Gaurav. Rahul sir, coming to you, given what Gaurav just said about doing it in this manner that is secure and the need for this data exchange, I was wondering if you could use your experience at Samagra to talk to us about how would we go about designing a consent-first, privacy-focused data system today? Like, what are insights, practical insights you might have for people in the room? Yeah.
Sure. Thanks for having us here, Manu. And if you think about consent, right? If you think about privacy first, it's less about the law and the word of the law, but the spirit of the law, and most importantly, baking those into principles that you do them from the start. And so, applying privacy as a principle by design is the way we've always gone about it. And so, when the law comes, it's no different because those are already being taken care of. I'll give you some examples. So if you're taking PII from a user, you're storing their name or you're storing their Aadhaar number, right? That's the most common case. Everyone says, oh, of course we need to store the Aadhaar number. Like, why do you want to do that? No, we want to deduplicate people and hence we need to store the number. Otherwise, how would we deduplicate it? Now, there's a simple technique which is one-way hashing that you could store a one-way hash of that number. So nobody can read that number. But when you compare two one-way hashes, you know that it is the same thing. And so deduplication happens without needing to store actual Aadhaar number. So in that way, a lot of things in terms of data can be actually handled by principle, by privacy, by design. The other part is in terms of actually having following some of these constructs that METI has very well laid out. There is the DEPA framework. If the audience hasn't seen it, just Google DEPA book. So that's digital empowerment architecture. And that essentially lays out a world of how should consent be done in India. And it's beautifully laid out and everyone's using it. So a part of healthcare, ABDM is all about consent. Any of the OTPs that we get, right? We just think it's OTP, but no, that's not OTP. That is consent being given. So when we go to a Jio store and get our SIM card, when he says OTP dena, it's really you're consenting to Jio looking at your Aadhaar details to verify your identity. And so this is very much, we are living and breathing DEPA as we speak about it. Every system is configured with it. And now there are advances in that as well. So if you think of advances in terms of how consent can be driven when you're sharing data between businesses and businesses or organizations and organizations. If you go to DEPA.world, there is an interesting experiment running with DEPA training cycle. And that is around how do you use data containers for storing anonymized data from two different parties, having that compute something and then self-destruct, only outputting the weights of a particular model. And so there are a bunch of technology innovations also happening in terms of preserving anonymity and working with data in a secure way. Lastly, I think everything boils down to how responsibly you're using it. So it finally boils down to the spirit of it. Law will keep catching up, but I think at the heart of it, I think we all need to be pure in the way we use data. We need to also be very well aware of licenses. So earlier when you're developing software, we had GPL license, we had Apache license, we had MIT license. We are familiar with those. But you go into the Hugging Face world and there are like 15 different AI licenses. It's basically saying, you know what, I scraped that data. I don't know whether that data is mine or not. The other one says, no, I have paid for that data and that data is definitely mine. And so who really owns that data? And not just about data, it's also the models. So if you take models like you take Llama 3, for example, you think, oh, Llama 3 is open source. And by far it is, but if you want to train a smaller model, so for example, one of the things we do is we do a lot of long tail in the government. So when we are working with farmers in Odisha or farmers in Uttar Pradesh or teachers in Uttar Pradesh, it's not that trivial. You think of everything will be understood. All the demos that you see of AI is like picture perfect Hindi or picture perfect English being talked about, right? But when you get down to a farmer in Odisha saying dhan, you're like, what is dhan? And dhan is the word for rice in a specific dialect in Odia. Now, how do you make that happen? Now, if you use Llama 3 to train a smaller model for it. First of all, Llama 3, OpenAI, none of them understand what dhan is, right? That's the first problem. Then you go down to, okay, you say, you know what, I will train my own small model. Now, if you use Llama 3 to generate that data and train a model on it, that's not allowed based on the terms of service. And so then you have to be very nuanced in terms of really knowing what licensing you're using, what models you're using. And that is why it's important to have grounds up research-based, truly open models created in India. And I'm really thankful for the work that the IndiaAI mission is doing. Bhashini we use time and again. Thanks to Bhashini. Bhashini, everyone thinks of Bhashini as one big model. It's not one big model. It's aggregation, curation of a multitude of research that is already happening in India. There's IITB having Marathi models, there's IISc creating a lot of data. So if you think of data, for example, when it comes to dialects or when it comes to conversational versus instructional data, when it comes to domain-specific data, where do we get those data sets, right? So IISc is working towards that. Now what Bhashini has done is enabled a common platform, look up ULCA, Universal Language Contribution API. I think that is one of the most, stark innovations in terms of what Bhashini has brought to the table, because it allows for 25 plus different universities to contribute data sets in a very nice standard. So when we want to train something on Odia, we can take that data set and train it. So all of this we need to know who owned the data, who created the data, was that data consented when it was gotten, and so on. So that makes a bigger, perspective on how consent is done or how privacy is maintained. Want to also touch one bit on the behavioral aspects and the cost aspects. And the benchmarking aspects. Actually, benchmarks, we think of whether it is consent, whether it is licensing, whether it's any of these or quality even. Benchmarks don't quite exist in the Indian context. And so when you think of, let's take, simple example of a conversation with a farmer. An Indian farmer does not type long love letters of text saying, this is the context of my problem, here is the problem that I have, here are the things I have tried and all, right? It's not Quora or Stack Overflow. What do you get from a farmer is that one word, dhan. And what about dhan? Are you talking about the pesticide you need for dhan? Are you talking about the crop that you want to sow next quarter? What exactly about dhan? And so anything is a multi-request response conversation. Generally, in AI world, you always have data sets. So there is MLLU, for example, that measures the accuracy of Q&A data sets. But that's one short Q&A, question, answer. In India, we need multiple question and answers. So who needs to own those benchmarks? who needs to create those benchmarks, what should be the licensing and things on those benchmarks, all again open. We have to create everything from scratch. And lastly, on the cost aspect, depending on who owns the data, depending on who is consenting for the data, who owns the entire value chain, costs are distributed. You think of, hey, let me just train a model, I just need GPUs. In the morning session, as you saw, everyone was just asking for free GPUs, right? GPU mila to bhi kya karoge? That is a question to be answered. So you need to triple click on it to say, how do you get smaller models in vogue? How do you really get researchers trained on those? How do you actually use on-device models? So I believe, finally it has to get to the phone. We can't keep connecting online and paying GPT 5 rupees per call that I make today. Right? So what we have been doing is trying to move things to smaller models. So use contextual domain level spell check with a KNLM, for example. And that does the job of what a OpenAI would do, but for 5 paise instead of a 5 rupee cost. Right? So those are innovations that need to happen. But I think throughout the supply chain, as long as this consent, data, clarity exists, and the spirit exists in everyone that I will do the right thing in this space, I think world will be a better place.
Manu, if I can add a couple of things to that. That was great, Rahul. I think as a company that we've been investing in trying to build AI-based experiences, we've gone through a lot of sort of the rigmarole here as well. I would say, I talk to a lot of startups, and the challenge is commercial versus public space, right? One of the collaborations we can talk about in a public domain, government funded, etc. But on a commercial basis, companies have to move forward. You mentioned this, you cannot build a differentiated product and experience that is competitively advantaged on an open source platform, right? Ultimately has to have some sort of proprietary data sets that you will have to leverage. The one advice I'll give you is always it takes time. So first of all, I think you laid out a lot of problems, and if you try to solve all the problems, this will, as in India, we will not advance fast enough. And so what I would say is start, because today you have access. You can go to Hugging Face, great community, lots of models, pre-models exist. One of the things, for example, my son is trying to kind of build something, and this is around wound detection. If you think about wound detection, basic wound detection and being able to provide the first aid, if you take a country like Kenya, Nigeria, etc., they don't have access to doctors. There's a lot of challenges. And so through an app, the problem is he's talking to me and my friends and is like, okay, I want to build this. Well, okay, where is the data? It's the same thing. Which data source you trust? And so we went to Hugging Face. We found some data sources, image data sources, etc. Now I know your company, so I'll probably point him at your company also to get some data for that. But that is a problem that lots of startups are facing as we see it. But they cannot sit idle for all these things to take shape. So get started. And start with smaller data set. To your point, smaller data set is useful. Even at Coursera, we are using an LLM, but we're using GPT 3.5, for example, version of it. You don't have to get to the latest and greatest model all the time. In fact, it's actually counterproductive if you try to get to the latest and greatest model, to be honest. And so start small, lower cost basis. Make sure you have some sort of a data governance framework from the beginning, because you cannot go back and lock up things later. That's something I think you will have to understand in terms of compliance, in terms of legal frameworks, in terms of satisfying European regulation versus US regulation versus India regulation. If you don't have a nice framework from the beginning, I think you'll struggle later, right, as you scale up. So these are some of the things that we have built into our principles as we started building it out, but we started small. And the contextual thing is really interesting as you think about from LLMs were generalized models. I think going into the future, it's all around the vertical spaces, right? Education, health, finance, etc. And so verticalized LLMs don't have to be large language models. Verticalized LLMs will be smaller language models because the language itself in finance will be limited. The language itself in health will be limited. So using that as a basis will be a way to think about.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for those points. I think really appreciate the richness of the conversation we are having here. We've discussed the need for consent first, privacy focused data sets. I love what you said about benchmarks and missing benchmarks. And I think whether it is Kavita ma'am talking about Bhasha Dan or you're talking about benchmarks, I do believe, I'm biased, but I do believe that our greatest resource is our people, right? And our people have the ability to fix it. Just wrapped a pilot called Pariksha with Microsoft Research, where we had the same farmers do the benchmarking for what is a good response to that Dhan question, right? And I think it's such a simple, basic thing, right? But I think as much as possible, if we can bring work to our people and have them do everything, I think we will end up building something that is community first and is excellent the way they define it, because they are the customers, right? And that's what we're all doing this for. I think the one topic we haven't discussed yet that I would love to get to is bias, right? Because it is very important that the data sets that we collect, that we put on the data sets platform, represent like all the things that we want to care about and are relatively bias free. I think would love to open it up to all the panelists to get a sense of how do you all currently think about bias in your frames of work? Maybe starting with you, Professor Sarkar, because I know you've done some work on this.
Yes. So I think what we have also heard across yesterday and today, that often a model is developed in one country or one location, taking data from other place and then tried in other location. I think that is what the major problem of bias is, that you are not building your model or you are not building it based on data on the population that you are going to try it on. And like, so Dr. Garg is here, like this is a perennial problem of statistics more than 100 years back. Like if you have to get estimates for the population of India, you basically stratify, and he was talking about stratification in different sample groups. Say if you have to get the higher income group he was talking about, if you don't get enough samples for the higher income group, obviously your estimates for the higher income group will not be representative from what examples he was talking about. I think it's the same problem in a new bottle that of AI, from statistics to AI, that we are seeing now. Like if the data is not representative of your population, I think that's the simple thing. And I think it's about understanding the population you will apply it on. Like if you know that you are going to try a healthcare solution in North India, in say Punjab, then even if a lot of work has been done in Apollo in the south, that really doesn't work, because the samples from the south will not work for say the samples from the north. I think that's the basic principle. Try to align these two aspects together so that they can take care of these aspects.
Right, because I think it shows up in funny ways, and it'll be nice to color it for the room when we say data bias, what the outcome of this is, right? So until 6 months ago, if you went to the most popular translation platforms and you said doctor is coming and you translate it into Hindi, it would translate by default as doctor aa raha hai, right? And if you say doctor is coming and her name is Reena, it would say doctor aa raha hai aur uska naam Reena hai, ignoring the explicit instruction of gender.
Yes.
Right? They have fixed it for now, but I can give you.
But
countless examples
Kalika
of
gave
this.
a very in a panel yesterday. You are there. She gave a very nice example of this, and I don't know if she's in the room. Like there are Indian languages, some have gender, some don't have gender, and then when you are translating between one to each other, some don't have a gender concept at all, some have for different objects. So I think it's a tricky problem that we have to solve for the Indian perspective, and that is where the foundational research layer is required. Like if you are doing it from Tamil to Malayalam, there is something has to be done in a different manner as say you are doing from Tamil to Punjabi, because I think those nuances has to be taken into consideration. Currently we look at English, which doesn't have gender on that perspective, and we try to think of the Indian languages which some have gender, some don't have gender, and I think that's where the problem lies.
But I'll color bias even further. So bias, we always look at it from a negative connotation of inclusion and so on, and that's great. That is a must. But in addition, there are more practical accuracy challenges with bias. So for example, if I have a lot of data and calls are coming in for rice, and I don't have any calls coming for say Peru, now my knowledge base around Peru is going to be weak. And I don't even realize it, because all I'm collecting is farming data. I say, you know what, I have farmer call center data, I have all the data I need. But unless you break it down to see what topic has how much data against it, you're biasing against certain topics as well. And so what we've come down to is boiling that down to knowledge graphs. I think knowledge graphs are very important to anchor data. We always talk about data as this big bucket of sand that you just pour, right? And we just want bigger buckets and we want truckloads of sand. That doesn't quite cut it. What you need is knowledge graphs, a taxonomy of things in any domain. And then all of our benchmarks, all of our anchoring of this data, categorization, annotation, and so on, happening around that knowledge graphs, make it very, very useful. And then breaking it down into smaller models. So maybe there's a model only for rice, and maybe there's a model only for X, or maybe there's a knowledge graph or a RAG system only for Y. I think building on top of it, and as opposed to all of us creating separate areas, I think collaboration is absolutely critical here. And that's where standards come in, and that's where this collaboration comes in, that we are all together talking about this. This is really nice.
Yes, so just to follow up on Rahul's issue, that I think it's a reality that there will be more rice being traded and sold as compared to, say, very rare fruit. And if you look at financial transaction also, if there are 1 million transactions, out of that only 100 might be fraudulent transaction. But when you are trying to build the model, you are trying to build the model for fraud. Like, you cannot wait for like 2 years till you get a sizable amount of transactions. So when you talk about the bias, we, in the context of this discussion, we are talking about dealing with bias by looking at the data side only, ensuring enough data is there. There are also ways to deal with it in the compute layer, and there are what something is called zero inflated model. Basically, this rare events are taken as zero, almost close to zero, and we inflate them. And the other aspect that is taken, once you have built the model and now you are looking at the output, you look at the recommendation or prediction that you are giving out, what is the risk of that recommendation? And you evaluate the risk versus reward, and then take a call whether this prediction should be given out or not given out. So there are ways to deal with it at the data level, processing level, or post-processing level, because often we are using APIs and we don't have handle to the first two. So we have to only deal with things only after the prediction has come out. So depending on how much control you have on the process, you can do various technologies there.
Just to add on.
Just to add toward this data bias, I think this can be taken care of. I'm not too sure Samagra and Civic Data may be in a better position to answer. If we have the good set of complete perspective of data, taking into account all the gender biases and all the aspects, and if we use synthetic data tools and generate a little bit more volume of data, I think the biases to some extent can be taken care of, but this is just my understanding, what I've read through. Samagra and Civic Data may be in a better position to answer, but I think to some extent the biases, the gender biases or the inequalities of the data can be handled. So this is what I feel.
So I think there is a lot of exploration on synthetic data going on, and Google recently published a paper on limitations of synthetic data as well. So I think definitely all the safeguards which we have been discussing are critical, and we need to ensure that organizations which are deploying algorithms at a scale, which are also called as high-risk automated decision-making systems, they need to proactively declare what are the kind of safeguards they have put. Along with, like, I'm installing a ride-sharing app, and I know, like, these are the kind of things they've already taken care of. These are the kind of metadata they are consuming from my app. That kind of proactive disclosure we need. But also, when you order something from an e-commerce and if you get a wrong item, you have an opportunity to report that. Similarly, here, as a consumer of an AI model, you should have an opportunity to report that I feel I was biased, or the algorithm was biased against me. So that's something we are exploring at Civic Data Lab. We are calling it as Parak, which would be a reporting framework for citizens to report that I feel the algorithm has a bias against me, and this is the evidence I have. And those kind of things then could be taken up by the producers of the AI.
Actually, a comment on what Kavita ma'am mentioned on synthetic data. In our experience, what we've seen is synthetic data just as a means to generate more data is not useful because that context has already been passed. what is useful, what we've seen synthetic data used in the context, not truly synthetic, it's a bad name. It is data in a different format, a more consumable format. So for example, if you take any government records, they're generally PDFs, and PDFs not with digital content, it's really typed things, it's all digitally done, but just for that signature, it turns into a photo. And so that needs to be scanned, then transcribed, then translated. And now it needs to be converted into a format that is easier for AI to digest. That format may be a knowledge graph, that format may be just a Q&A response of FAQ. And so turning that into a FAQ, also anonymized at many places, that is really the process of synthetic data that we generally use it for. But just generating more data for a certain topic, just to balance something else, generally doesn't quite cut it, just our limited experience.
Thank you so much for this. I think this has been a phenomenal conversation. I think the bias question is just so fascinating, honestly. I think Dr. Bali, who you know very well, we've been working with her on something, on creating a benchmark around it. And we are trying to come up with a way to quantitatively tell how much gender bias is there in a sentence. It's very hard because starting with what she was talking about yesterday, there's no definition of gender bias, right? So we have started by building community source definitions of gender bias, then trying to way of automating what is the percentage likelihood a sentence has gender bias, and then creating some score around it. It's very, very hard, but I think there's some work that researchers are doing around doing that, which is exciting. I think I want to open it up for questions from the audience. Oh wow, there's so many already. And I think just want to thank the panelists for a truly very, very phenomenal conversation. Rahul sir, your points on privacy and consent. I think Gaurav, your experience on building civic systems, just incredible. Kavita ma'am and Dr. Garg, I think just most phenomenal presentations. And Shravan and Professor Sarkar, thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Yeah, hello, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Nishant from DeepSight AI Lab. I am a CEO and CTO of Artificial Intelligence company. So I think related to synthetic data, I think the ma'am, what she said, right? I felt when you are solving any problem, you may not have a data for those particular problem object to detect it on the videos, and you don't have those much data. So at that perspective also, what we are doing, we are able to create a sticker of that particular object, placing into taking the videos from the education sector or wherever we want to detect those things, and putting that sticker. Okay, if somebody is carrying the PC and moving in the examination room, right, that is not allowed, and but we don't have a data who is moving the PC, right, something like that. So in that perspective also, synthetic data is important, where you are sticking the sticker of the PC and detecting the hand and placing the that particular thing, and we are creating a lot of synthetic data around that, even before getting into the live network, because you have seen that the in the simulated environment, your model is perfectly running fine. You have a training, your training and validation set, you are getting 90-95% accuracy. But when it is getting into the actual live world scenario, multiple different scenario, your accuracy drops to 50 or 60%. So there also we are doing a lot of work with the synthetic data, where if we have a video from that particular sector and we don't have an object in that sector, that video we can just take it entire NVR video, we can take it for 1 or 2 or 3 days, and on that video we are placing with the synthetic that particular sticker here and there, so that our trained model is, before getting to the live network, we will have our model perfect, maybe 80-90% on their environment. So that is also kind of we can use the synthetic data. I hope you agree on this, right?
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Could we just get some questions, please? Maybe 2-3 questions, because we only have 2 minutes. Yeah.
Yes, I have just a question regarding this, that we have so much of a heterogeneous data at this point of time, which impacts, data mining, data performance as such, and data quality, because we have so many devices, operating systems and softwares, and now even this with multimodal, voice, images, etc. And not everyone in India is that much, equipped to read these graphs, numeric stages. So how will we be able to get this to a right solution, so that these will be able to, because India does not have those type of data forms like Snowflake, Databricks, etc., which can retrieve and process these data in a meaningful way. So
got it. Thank you. Maybe we'll take 2-3 questions together and then just answer them.
Yeah.
So we spoke about the anonymization of the data, and we also spoke that it can be broken as well. And many times we cannot radically anonymize it also. And we also talk about consented data. So I believe, or I am sure it must be considered that there is two ways of consenting the data. One is the consenting of data, where I am saying I am sharing my personal data. Please give me the OTP comes, I share and I consent that I am providing this information in return of getting something. While in the model of training data where we are doing some anonymization and we are sharing it for the purpose of training the learning, creating a data set outside, we can't get the consentation of millions of documents and maybe person is no more available, all those kind of. So we have to see the consent from a different perspective when I share the data in respect of, in return of something, or when the data is being shared as part of the data set. So consent becomes different meaning here. So I think that's being considered here.
Point taken. Any other question? Yes.
So do we have any sort of system in place in India which is not yet codified, but we are following it? And the other small question is, in the morning session, a lot of talk was made about data centers. India generates 20% of the global data, but we have only 2% of the global data centers. So any comments on that and way forward? Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Yes, I think there's one question. Yeah.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you. I'm Manan Gaur, co-founder Excitey.com. Just a couple days back, we launched our own web application with our own custom database. So my question is to Mr. Saurabh Garg. You initially talked about creating data centers for India and having our own in-house data sets and all of that. There have been multiple startups as well as many up-and-coming companies who have risen by selling Indian data blatantly and shamelessly to American corporations or many other corporations like OpenAI, Microsoft. What does the government of India plan to do and how do they plan to deal with this?
I think Rahul sir, you want to go first? Sure. With the question on heterogeneous data or consent.
Yeah, let me take a couple of those. So one is, what is it being done to make data retrieval simple, easy? Sir, you had that question, right? Actually, you'd be surprised if you go to ndap.gov.in, that is the Niti Aayog data portal, or even data.gov.in. You'd be surprised how easy is it to actually run very complex queries. So on the back end, from what I understand, it's a complex, multi-data set joining framework, even better than some of the other countries which only support one data set. You download it and then it's your problem. In NDAP and all, you are able to actually cross-join across different data sets. So by default, there is some provision made available. That said, nothing to run away from, actually needing to download the data and then using it in your own software, whether it's Druid or Metabase. I think that is more a literacy thing. People are stuck on Excel. We need to migrate to more Python and more, Druid and other kind of data, OLAP kind of systems. The other question around consenting for data collection, sir, your question around that, right? It's a very tricky one because you would not realize how startups and all can, or any companies, right, big companies will misuse that. So assuming that it is there. So generally what happens in large big tech companies also, that whenever you sign into the screen the first time, there is this huge, you are consenting to privacy and terms of service, right? You have sold your life there. So wahi pe gaya. So that is the place where at least they're calling it out ki we are doing it. If we don't follow even that, right, it's a very slippery slope to go in. So I would say consent is good. Now where to bake in consent is more of the question, but consent should be there. It's just a personal opinion. Yes. Then the last one around, sir, your question around GDPR, right? Privacy by design, privacy by default. Why those wordings? I don't remember exact wordings like that in DPDP, but the spirit of it exists. So you cannot randomly co-opt people into things. That's very clearly said by DPDP. So DPDP in India is fairly comprehensive. In the US, you just don't have a GDPR, you have a CCAP or what is that, California law for emailing and all, right, spam. GDPR is very comprehensive. DPDP, I would say, is like a superset in that sense. In fact, fairly strict. So it's going to be seen as to how everyone complies with it. But the right to be forgotten, the right to ensure that you have consent, you can pull out consent of child data is very strictly enforced in DPDP, and that's a good thing. But at the same time, when you're thinking of creating AI models for children, for K-12, right? We're so much focus on education and NEP and all. Now you want to create models for children. You can't get consent. एक एक बच्चे से लोगे क्या? What is your consent? You can't get consent. You need to get the parental consent for data. So all of that will create hurdles, but I think it's the right thing to do. We need to figure out how to make those hurdles easier. But all the right things happening in those laws.
Sir, I have one question.
I'm so sorry, sir. I really appreciate it. But I'm sure the panelists will say after, but Dr. Sarkar.
Yes, I will just follow on the consent part particularly. So I think consent is a very good mechanism to inform and take data, but often consent cannot be done, as he also mentioned, or this gentleman here mentioned. So I think we have to look at privacy enhancing methods. And Kavita ma'am also talked about compute on the IndiaAI platform, and I was part of the committee. So we have discussed about this to a large extent. So today, if taking the example of Google, today if you want to get from point A to point B, you ask Google Maps how much time it takes. It gives that estimate based on the Android phones that you and many of us are using. They have taken our consent on day one, that's fine. But the good thing about privacy by design that they have done is that they are not hampering any of my private information in doing that. So they are aggregating it and making this data available as an API. So what the privacy enhancing techniques will do is that the data will lie in a safe environment, and iSpirit and many other organizations have also done prototypes of this nature. The person or researcher or startup will send a piece of code, it will do some computation and come up with results. So you compute, say, a regression or a learning model on the data without looking into the data, just by looking at what the fields are and getting some. I think that is the future of things are. So we don't have to worry about privacy at all once these things are done. What the other thing that also is coming up is, so this is from the, say, a data is stored by a bank, data is stored by a hospital. So this is what can happen when you do PET. The other is the aspect of the data trust. So these are like three options to deal with personal data. One is the consent one, which is what have been done by DEPA and OTP, another thing. The second one is the PET, and third one is the data trust, which will become operational in Europe from 2025. So I, as an individual, I go to a retail store, Big Bazaar or Reliance Smart or something, I decide that I will share my retail bill to a data trust. So data trust doesn't exist today, and that data trust can decide to take that data, get all the data for all the citizens and publish some reports, and MOSPI will be in a good position to be a data trust. They can also decide, similar to Bhashadan, they can also decide to pay me some money for the data I'm paying. So that the ecosystem becomes much more interesting, and many more people participate in it. So for every bill that I submit, I might get 1 rupee or 2 rupees paid. Even if it's a small amount, that excites me to submit data more, and I get monetized for the data that I am creating. So these are very interesting concepts in data that is coming up today, because sharing data completely as a bulk used to be done 10-20 years back, but we have to move to newer model, and Gaurav, you are all aware of all these things, we are part of the discussions. I think newer models has to evolve, and given that we didn't have the Y2K problem because we started a bit late, I think given that we are also starting on the AI journey a bit later than many of the countries, I think we are in that advantageous position to take up these newer technologies also. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there was one question on selling of data. So I'll just say there are two aspects to it. One is if the data is available free on the government websites and someone is then developing, doing some value addition to that and selling, that's perfectly legal. And there can be no two ways on that. But the issue would be that in case there is some data which is supposed to be anonymous, or and then there are certain models run on and then it is made in a manner in which one can identify, that's purely a fraud. It is fraudulent, and it needs to be then taken as per the law of the land. So I would just leave it at that, and I think these are some of the issues which the DPD Act is tackling. And I think these are issues of whether it's consent, whether it's bias, whether it's anonymization. And I think we are talking about these issues because these are the issues which are coming up as we use more and more data. And I'm sure as we go ahead, we'll keep on finding solutions to that. But these are live issues, and I think all of you are fully aware of that. Thank you.
Just if I may add, like, I think just to kind of think about there's consent, compliance, and there's responsibility. I think fundamentally companies who are gonna, startups, like you mentioned, a startup, like we all have to be responsible in how we are using the data that we're asking from our customers. Those companies that do not build the trust of the customer eventually will be in trouble, as you pointed out. So that's something that we take seriously. The other piece is, though, then you could be doing all those three, but you still may be making mistakes. And this is the AI with the data, the way we use bias, fairness, all of that stuff, it's very hard to detect. So having humans in the loop is still a very important aspect of development at this stage of AI. So whether it's machine translations, whether it is questions generated, whether it is assessments getting validated, etc., we are using humans in the middle to kind of validate some of these answers itself. So that's something I will definitely suggest people do before you just kind of full scale launch. We've seen all kinds of examples, even big companies, how those answers have turned out to be.
Thank you so much. I think I really appreciate this. Thank you for this incredible panel, all the amazing questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Garg. Thank you so much, Kavita ma'am. Kavita ma'am, any final thoughts, anything you want to say?
It's been a very interesting discussion. Lot of learning for me as well, and lot of inputs I have taken which are very useful when we are conceptualizing a platform, or for that matter even the National Data Management Office. Some of the points are very important for us because, as I said, that we are still on the drawing board, and still we can make certain corrections, and but I feel that once even the solution is out, there is always a provision that course corrections can be done. So nothing is permanent. We all are learning from our experience. This is what we have done in e-governance, and we have been proven ourselves as one of the DPI providers. So I think in AI also we can do that, and we can be a provider rather than a user of AI. Thank you.
Absolutely, yes. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Before we close off the session, please, I would like to call upon Mr. Manu Chopra to please felicitate our honorable keynote speaker, Dr. Saurav Garg, sir. I would then like Mr. Chopra to felicitate the esteemed panel members, Srimati Kavita Bhatia ma'am, Mr. Shravan Goli, Professor Avik Sarkar, Mr. Gaurav Godwani, Mr. Rahul Kulkarni. Lastly requesting Kavita ma'am to please felicitate Mr. Manu Chopra. I would request all the panelists to please stay in the room for a short interview round. A hearty thank you to our honorable keynote speaker, our esteemed panelists, and our moderator for sharing their domain expertise and perspectives throughout this session. Thank you so much.